South Africa's transition from apartheid to democracy held out the promise of a better life for all. Yet just over 2 decades later, poverty abounds, the country's unemployment crisis is worsening, and inequality is leading to increasing incidents of social protests and violence. Resentment and disillusionment are palpable, and young people are agitating for change and justice. By all indications, the promise of a better life for all is being betrayed. Behind me are the Union Buildings, the seat of South Africa's government. This is the place that the president occupies. This is where citizens look to for leadership, vision, and direction. After 5 successive ANC administrations, led by Nelson Mandela, Thabo Mbeki, Jacob Zuma, and now Cyril Ramaphosa, and with clear failures of governance, weakening state capacity, and a decline in ethical and moral quality of leadership, and mounting social and economic troubles, it is fair to ask, is the ANC fit and capable to lead South African society to a better future?
What is your sense, if you were to appraise the last 5 administrations of the ANC government? Just before they came to power, they released a document that said, ready to govern. Now you have been watching, on the sidelines, commentating and analyzing. In your view, what is your assessment of that? Were they ready to govern?
I think for me, the biggest challenge is that when it comes to governance, there's a generic assumption that governance is it's a neutral process and systems. And we have delinked governance aspect in this country from their natural context of being a manifestation of class interests, of who gets what and how does one get that, what they need to get. So what is the essence of governance? Governance determines the rules and processes and systems that need to be followed in the pursuit of what people seek to attain. That's the core of it. And so what happened in 94, 93 at CODESA, these negotiations were actually a contestation about the rules of resource allocation and access. And because the ANC came from a liberation tradition, its interest was to pursue governance in a manner that assures redistribution of resources to the deprived. But from where I'm sitting, they lost that debate, that drive. For those that came from the apartheid tradition, their interest was to retain the economic gains that they have acquired over time, but within the new governance institutions and systems. So these negotiations that established the Constitution, which is the fundamental base of all governance processes and systems, it's not a neutral process. It was a contestation. And because the apartheid masters had already packed what they had and how they should protect it, the new constitution then brought things like the property clause, which prevented the redistribution of land and other redistribution. In fact, the ANC even stopped using the term redistribution, as way back as 94. Disregarding the fact that it was the core for the liberation. And the issues around the freedom of the independence of the Reserve Bank, how the finances of the country will be managed. In fact, The Treasury is the only, ministry or department outside the presidency which is included in the Constitution. So when we talk about governance, which is about the rules, processes, and systems that determines who gets what and how will you get that, these rules are not independent. They're not just neutral. They came in as part of that contestation. So this is why you will hear many people saying that, white people are the biggest beneficiaries of Black economic empowerment because of their expertise and knowledge of the systems. They determined how that would work out post-94.
Now, I like this and this point that you're making about rules. So somebody would argue, but the ANC is in power. The ANC has power to change the rules of the game, if that's the problem, right? If that's the issue, It has the power to determine new sets of processes, new sets of systems, put in place those systems and processes to deliver on its own promises and mandates, but also to ensure that the state is run efficiently and effectively and actually delivers on developmental imperatives.
Well, one of the things I've learned in the few years of doing this political analysis is that we frankly give the ANC more power than it has. And that becomes the basis of most frustration. Because we think the ANC has this knowledge to drive a Ferrari, only to find that it's still at the test level. We want to take a car driver to be a pilot. And it doesn't work. I think we have confused electoral support with the real power in society. The real power in society lies on who has got the resources, who runs the economy, the monopolies, who owns the land, and all of those things. And all of these institutions that underground, they determine the policies that are followed by the ANC. So here's a typical example. So the ANC, it fought for land, right, over the centuries. A few years ago, it goes on a public hearings. Do you want the land expropriation without compensation? Now, for a political party that has got power, that's the historical mandate that the masses have given it. Why would you, 20 years into a democracy, go into some public hearing and say, do you really want this thing? That practically doesn't make sense, but that is a manifestation of the expectations that we have of the ANC vis-a-vis its substantive power.
How do we then solve the country's problems when you've got this party with electoral support, right? And in fact, what you're saying is that this party has no power, substantively has no power. So how do we then...
It has power.
Yes.
It's just that it's not as much as we think it has.
It's one thing to discuss what it doesn't have power over. It doesn't have power over the markets. It doesn't have power over capital. And I think that's where we need to drill down. You've actually made the point that the ANC government and successive ANC administrations have actually not been living up to their mandate, even just to provide services. I know we can talk about the good story to tell, where since 1994, we've seen more and more families and households added to the electricity grid. We know that water and sanitation has been rolled out quite extensively across the country. But we can talk about the consistency of the availability of those services, right? The water itself. When I go outside my village or that tap that has been put in, will I actually get water out of that tap? Now we started experiencing load shedding, in the early 2000s, right? 2007, 2008, we started seeing load shedding coming on board. We started with stage 1, stage 2. Nowadays it's stage 4.
We'll run out of stages.
We're going to run out of stages at this point. So the inability to be consistent in those kinds of things. The reason why I'm bringing this to the fore is that we need to be able to hold government to account.
Yes.
So if the argument is that the ANC has no control over resources, over the economy, and therefore cannot dictate or therefore cannot take certain steps or certain decisions, that is one thing. But on these other things, why are we continuing to put these people in power or see them being put in power literally, and yet they don't have the competence, seemingly, to deliver on these processes?
You're raising two critical points. The first one, which the ANC should easily do, is its capacity to deliver on its mandate. Now, some of these things are not a nightmare to do. Like you're saying, building, the delivery of water infrastructure. These are things that are within their plans. These are things that are within the budget of because once they plan properly, then they must budget for it. These are the commitments that are constantly made over the State of the Nation address every year. Now, those things that the ANC government has made a commitment to and they are funded, then they should be able to generate the proper project management, operational, plans, deliver and ensure that there's proper monitoring. Now, those are your basic state capacity. Those are your basic your basic daily things that they can easily do. And the credit to the ANC. If you look at Home Affairs, for example, Home Affairs is just a brilliant government institution. You apply for a passport, you are guaranteed lately within 3 days you'll get it. You don't even have to walk in there. They will tell you, they call you, they send you messages that, it is there, you can come and collect it. You get it, they even send you a message, thank you, we know that you have taken your... So those pockets of excellence, the ANC can possibly accelerate the delivery of basic services because they are in the budget and operational plans of the ANC. So what they possibly need, and this is, I'm glad Nompumelelo, we are raising these things because we hardly talk about the capacity of the bureaucracy. And the part of the problem of this capacity of this bureaucracy is that it is too steeped in a routine exercise. So you have bureaucrats who are not necessarily mentally infused with the conception of transformation, but rather the comfort of being in a job. They know that I can be at work latest at 8:30. I'm guaranteed a 10 o'clock tea break. I have lunch at 1. And the earliest I can leave work is 4:30. There is no transformation or people-centered consciousness, in the bureaucracy, with the exception of this one that I'm mentioning in terms of the Department of Home Affairs. So if the ANC was to be able, or any government, at provincial, at local government, to build on that, those are the things that they can do. Now, if you then look at the other side, in terms of the challenges of ESCOM and all the state-owned enterprises, now that is scary, and I'll tell you why it is scary. Because the biggest basis of the growth of any society is the ability of the political leadership to undertake a long-term plan and to stick to it and to deliver accordingly. If you have ESCOM problems that they started to manifest themselves in the year 2000, over time SAA has been in all these problematic issues. PRASA has all been in, and if that problem persists, it particularly tells you that you have got a political leadership which is unable to plan long term, to resource long term, and to perform over a sustained period of time. It's like it is not different from the behavior of the bureaucrats who walk in and say, what is to be done today? So this is why, for example, sometimes we are told there's a Zuma era, there's a Mbeki era, there's now a Ramaphosa era, but what we are not told is that all of these drivers, they come from the same driving school. So the problem is not so much them as individuals, but the driving school that they come from. And for me, that is the scary part, because if you have a government that is incapable of long-term planning and execution, then we will jump from one pothole to another until we run out of the road for potholes.
In 2018, the South African government had a change of guard when Cyril Ramaphosa was sworn in after former President Jacob Zuma resigned following pressure from within his own party, the ANC. President Zuma's tenure was marred in controversy. The public protector found that he had unduly benefited from non-security-related upgrades to his homestead in Nkandla, had allowed the Gupta family undue influence over his government, and the Constitutional Court found that he had violated his oath in his handling of the Nkandla matter. Under South Africa's scheme of separation of powers, Parliament must exercise oversight over the executive. Nevertheless, the Zuma years demonstrated Parliament's ineffectiveness to hold the President and his ministers to account.
A man stand up. Point of order. Yes. Nkandla. Thixo waseGeorge Cook. Hey. There is a broken president in a broken country,
Minister who is not doing their job, no, they get protected by you, and you come to Parliament to defend the minister who is completely incompetent. It can't be. That's funny democracy.
You are talking about a finance minister who was removed without doing anything. You don't know the reasons. Presidents, when they take decisions, they don't publicize the decision, why they take the decision about anything.
So how do we inculcate a culture within Parliament where oversight is taken seriously? How do we inculcate a culture in Parliament where there's no fear to defy the executive? Not just amongst opposition benches, but within the benches of the
What is worrying me in South Africa is that if we are not going to fix education, and if we are going to continue with this linguistic exclusion, because 80% of the people of this country are excluded linguistically. I mean, you just have to go to any shelf in South Africa, a food shelf or whatever. There is no representation. Black Africans, it's like they don't exist. Only English and Afrikaans. Now, I am saying, the minute we start ensuring that the information is available to people in the language they understand, then you are going to end up with a society that is more informed and that understands better their rights and their obligations, and even holding those they elect into power accountable. Something is beginning to happen in South Africa. You can see that at local government level, things have went really bad, but you are beginning to see people really taking to the streets because people are now believing in saying we can no longer be victims.
Now, we are sitting with a major problem of the state-owned enterprises that have been looted and pillaged. We're sitting with an ESCOM, which has a monopoly on power generation, and yet is not delivering on its mandate, obviously because of the situation that I've just outlined. What was the role of parliamentary oversight in where we are today? And do you foresee that we are going to see any form of accountability for the crises we are seeing erupting all over the place? You've spoken about local government level and the fact that communities are now coming to the fore. But what of those requirements for accountability, for individual responsibility, for those who lead institutions, for those who lead government departments?
You must know that your country is in trouble when even chairs of portfolio committees are implicated in state capture. You will recall that some of the chairs of portfolio committees were implicated. They were given bribes, they were paid, their children were paid some money to go and study overseas. So it really begins to talk about the culture of a society. And I think the parliament is, I can tell you now, it is very weak. The fact that I, for one, in my committee, that I chaired, the Public Service and Administration, which I chaired for a very short time, when I was holding the minister to account, on that same day, that same minister convened a meeting of the study group, and the study group fired me. So you have a problem there. In other words, we need this. I think we need to correct the electoral system in South Africa. If we have directly elected at least 50%, and there is a Van Zyl-Slabbert report, by the way, it's already there, it's already demarcated these things. If we can get a constituency-based parliamentary system, believe you me, I do believe that we are not going to see as much, we are not going to see this kind of rot. In South Africa, almost every SOE has collapsed. And you ask yourself, how can SOEs collapse when we are there? And I can tell you, because if you recall, I was part of the committee of SAPC on the SAPC inquiry. What happened there? We did our work, we uncovered a lot, we then made recommendations, we wanted certain people to be kicked out, and guess what? All that has been reversed now. So you are working backwards. So I'm saying to you, it's the culture that we need to change. We need to get South Africans more involved, especially through the change of the electoral system, so that our oversight function is going to be a lot stronger.
What is your view on the importance of presidential leadership? And often we are made to think that with the change of personalities in that office, something is going to change, something will be different. In your view, what significance does that hold?
Leadership is everything. I'm going to give you a very good example, and many people are not taking note of that here at home. Take Rwanda. You have President Kagame. He came from this genocide, people killing one another, and I mean, you had close to 1 million people killed within 100 days. Guess what is happening in Rwanda now? It took a leadership of the caliber of Kagame. Now you must see the economy is growing there. The order that you see, the cleanliness in the cities. If you are going to elect a leader that is severely compromised, you are going to end up with the kinds of challenges that we have. You will remember that when we had the President Nelson Mandela, I don't care who says what, but that man got in there. He was very clear that I'm going to be an exemplary president. He said, I'm going to serve one term, and he served one term. He said we needed to build the social cohesion. We needed to coexist. And he lived by that, even going to an extent of employing this lady, as his PA, because he was trying to say, if you are a leader, you will do the things that people are most uncomfortable about. So I'm saying we had a very good president there. And you can see even the kinds of things. I know that most of the time we say it's very superficial and so forth. But you can see even with the nation, it was beginning to gel. We didn't have as much corruption as we have now. And then you had Mbeki. Mbeki was very strong. He had his own strength. In terms of economic policies, he was very strong. Remember that South Africa we had a lot of debt. And even the bonds at that time, the interest rate were around 26%. something that we haven't seen. But Mbeki focused on that and we succeeded. And I am saying to you, leadership is everything. Then when you had Zuma, then help broke loose. The scorpions we did away with scorpions, we introduced lame hawks and so forth, and then corruption was able to take its hold and it grew. And now it's like this monstrous inferno that we cannot put off. And it doesn't look like we are going to be able to change in South Africa. And I'm sorry to say this. In South Africa, you also need a regime change. You need a regime change. There is no way you can have a Ramaphosa who's been there for 9 years with President Zuma, and all these things were happening under his watch, and you think that all of a sudden things are going to change. You have even the Secretary General of the ANC in the most powerful position, and we know he's implicated in the state capture and whatnot. You have the Deputy President. So really, it's not going to happen because at the leadership level, you have not changed. Leadership is everything. It can shape and mold the culture of a society. It can build or destroy a nation. And for as long as we have the kind of leadership that we have, we are not going to be able to rise as the South African society.
The combination of a governing party with a large majority in parliament, with its caucus getting directives from the party's executive, led by the very president they are supposed to hold accountable, has made a farce of this system of checks and balances. With this context still firmly in place, it is perhaps wise to maintain some healthy skepticism about reform under a new administration led by President Ramaphosa.